Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So here is another scary story for you guys today. Let's get on with the video. I lived next door to this one kid who always had bandages wrapped around their whole head, even covering his face. I remember his name was Wilbert, a 12-year-old boy who never left his house. He sometimes looked out his bedroom window on the top floor at the other kids who would play outside. While Wilbert sat and watched, I remember his window had metal bars on them, so there was no way he could climb out of his bedroom window. We sometimes communicated with each other by writing to each other on a piece of paper. Since Wilbert can't hear me because the window was locked, Wilbert only does it when his parents aren't around since they are weird. His mother and father were one of those parents that were insanely crazy about science and chemistry, according to Wilbert. They would stay in the basement and work all day and night, except at the times where they had to give Wilbert some food daily. Now, they aren't treating him like an animal. His parents were just very busy. They told Wilbert that he shouldn't go outside to make contact with anyone until his face got better. He told me that he accidentally slept on one of his parents' chemicals and fell face first, ruining his appearance. And his parents feared that he would be made fun of by other kids in the neighborhood. I remember one time a couple of older kids were throwing rocks and the pebbles at his window, laughing and pointing at Wilbert as he looked down at them. He told me that they do it a few times, but he got used to it. But to me, he's a great guy and still is today. I had never been inside his house, but he showed me some cool stuff he collected, like comic books. He had loads of them, from Marvel's to DC to non-superhero comics. He was a huge superhero fan. He even said that he felt like a superhero, a normal human being who has been affected by a dangerous chemical, and then became a powerful superhero. He once wrote a piece of paper and had it put on his window as he pretended to be a superhero. I had a collection of action figures and video games that amazed Wilbert. He told me he never played a single video game in his life, which was quite sad. He also told me that babysitter took them away from him before he could play them and burned them in front of him. Wilbert had a mean babysitter named Miss Fritzl, a tall, mean lady who never liked his kids at all. They stare before his face becomes messed up, and told me. She was basically every kid's nightmare, at all things I heard she has done. Miss Fritzl had babysat many kids before, and trust me, it's not pretty. Wilbert told me that the last kid she babysat for, a 4-year-old girl, she made her live through 7 hours of hell. Wilbert said Miss Fritzl starved her and surrounded her bed with a few bear traps, and the worst thing that happened, the parents didn't know about her deeds. She would lie to them just to get paid. All those things I have heard. She is a foul, cruel woman with no soul at all. And now that she had to babysit this poor guy, Wilbert had old enough to make his own decisions, except for some. But his parents apparently hired an evil witch. The parents had to go to Texas to a science convention, and Wilbert had to be left alone with her. One time I was writing about her to show to him, but then I saw Miss Fritzl forcefully pulling him away from the window, and that was the rest of my day without talking to him. The next day I looked through the window to see Wilbert. I saw something laying down on his bed, looking at a person wrapped head. I banged my fist on the window, trying to get Wilbert's attention. He slowly sat up on his bed, wiping away tears from his eyes. He seemed to be crying, which gave me a thought. I had a worried look on my face, and I saw bruises all over his arms and legs, and a faded dark tone of purple. He went to write something down on a piece of paper. Then, as Wilbert finished writing, he went up to the window and pressed the note on the glass. When he wrote had terrified me. The whole situation still burned in the back of my mind, something I knew I would never forget. He wrote, "Help me." What made it worse was that his handwriting was scribbled onto the piece of paper and was almost illegible. Wilbert kept banging on the window with his other hand. Then suddenly I saw someone else run into the bedroom next to him. It was her. You know who. She had something in both her big chubby hands. It had a lemon and it was one pair of scissors. What Miss Fitch did terrified me even more. Miss Fitch ran up to Wilbur, grabbing his head, holding it still. I saw him screaming in pain and fear, so I knew I had to do something. At the same time, I couldn't stop watching. She used the scissors to cut open the bandages that wrapped them on his head and threw them onto the side. When I saw, almost made my mouth vomit, something that sickened me. I was utterly shocked at looking at Wilbur's real deformed face. His whole head was completely covered with bandages, and that was underneath was the all-purpose too. I saw his face almost melting off, showing a dark red layer underneath. I could only imagine his face looking like a melted cheese or a cheeseburger. Wilbur's whole face, even his eyeballs, were burned out of it. The chemicals had messed him up badly. Miss Fitch sliced the lemon in half with scissors, pinning Wilbur down on the bed. Then she threw the scissors at the side next to the bandages and held his head still with his hand and the other hand. She squeezed the lemon slice onto Wilbur's head and onto his eyes, even red layers of face. The painful expression on his face, his loud muffled screams, his face stinging from acid of the lemon juice. She used the other lemon to squeeze onto his face again, torturing Wilbur for an extreme pain. I decided to bang my fist on the window, which was a brand new. Miss Fitch looked over to the bedroom window right at me. I jumped back as she noticed me. She ran out the bedroom, shoving Wilbur down, and she screamed in pain and agony. I knew she was going to do, so I ran out of my bedroom and ran downstairs. The good thing about the situation was my parents don't know about Wilbur and the fact that they were at work for a little while. I locked the front door, hoping that Miss Fitch wouldn't bust into my house. I looked around the house, phone, and I was about to a loud bang rang in my ears. I looked behind myself at the door and noticed her red, sweaty face and curly blonde hair. But the look in her eyes, I knew there was going to be something trouble. She kept banging at the door, nearly screaming her head off. I looked around for the phone. I finally spotted it next to the couch on the coffee table. I ran towards it, dialing 911 as the sound of Miss Fitch's threatening screams heard from outside. Waiting a few minutes, I finally heard the operator's voice, the usual greeting from 911 operator. I started explaining the whole situation, beginning to end, and as quickly clear as possible. They told me to wait patiently as the police would arrive soon. It took a few minutes for the police to arrive at my house. Not only did they arrive, but my parents arrived early from work too. Apparently they got a call from the police explaining my situation and decided to come early. My parents were extremely worried and frightened. They asked me more questions about it, and then the police did. I had to explain everything, from being Wilbur's friend to how his parents left him with an abusive babysitter, to do what she tried to do to him. About an hour later, the police officer came back to me as he had something he wanted to tell me about the horrifying thing that took place next door. The truth about the babysitter, the parents, and Wilbur were truly shocking. Based on the evidence found, Wilbur's parents weren't his actual parents at all. They adopted Wilbur from an orphanage that was out of town, only to perform experiments on him. It was the reason why he moved to Texas, to hide. The babysitter, Miss Fitch, was part of the experiment too. In fact, Wilbur wasn't the first kid to get adopted by the scientists. They had done illegal experiments to those orphans, and it was to find out that as much pain as a child can take before death, based on the cause of death and age of the child. 38 children between the ages of 2 and 13 were reported missing, and Wilbur was one of them. There were security cameras outside and inside the house. Right now, they arrested Miss Fitch for child cruelty and death of many children, and on the other case to find the 2 scientists. All of that, and I was friends with someone who has been killed if I didn't call the police. Apparently, Wilbur also tried to lie about almost everything he told me. He was trying to protect himself. He was sent to trust me and family. I am a married couple who lived out of town. Since then, I never saw him again until now. 23 years later, I went to the bar to get myself a drink by myself when a man approached me. "Remember me?" he said. The familiar man smiling at me. I smiled back, realizing how long it's been. I had last seen Wilbur. In fact, he looked like a nice, healthy man now. Without his bandages, he was brown-haired, with sky blue eyes. He almost looked like a complete stranger. After all that, he talked to me and drank a few glasses. Finally speaking to each other in person, Wilbur and I knew that nobody would try to get us apart. The scientists and babysitter were probably locked up right away. After all, I still couldn't stop thinking of the fact that this man could have been killed if I didn't save his life. Well, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you guys for my next video.